Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are on your own screen and in whatever territory. Today we have, again, somebody special around our hot topic of the year, artificial intelligence. Andreas Welsch is an internationally recognized AI leader, advisor, and speaker. He is also the founder and chief AI strategist as Intelligence Briefing and author of the AI Leadership Handbook, which he surely will show us. Yeah, well, that was the pin there too. In his former business lives in SAP, he has advised a side of them, the Fortune 500 leaders on AI, integrated AI across enterprise applications, and positioned SAP as a leader in business AI. Previously, he had led global IT process automation projects, and now he is very busy in advising and talking about artificial intelligence. He's also an adjunct professor at Westchester University in Pennsylvania, where he lives, and serves on the editorial board of the Journal of AI, Robotics, and Workplace Automation. He's also a frequent keynote speaker and panelist, as today with us, and named a top voice in LinkedIn. Also, he's a member of the Harvard Business Review Council and Gardner Peer Community Ambassador. So we have today a lot of interesting aspects to go for, and I would like to start it off with the book. You wrote a book, and that would be my starting point to move in artificial intelligence and the topics you are talking about and advising about. And that practical guide, we just go for the interesting part of talking about AI. How much AI did you use in creating and writing that book? Welcome, Andreas.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And I love that question because I don't get it enough. Right? And I didn't use any AI in creating the book. And I'll tell you why. I believe as an author, if you want to convey your thoughts, if you lay out a concept, a framework, a strategy, I firmly believe that your readers want to read and hear from you, not some kind of AI that has kind of put it together and you're like, yeah, I think that could be right, but I want to get this out as fast as I can, right? I believe that as an author, also when the lights go out, when ChatGPT is not available and the like, you need to know what you want to talk about. You need to articulate your thoughts, and you need to know how all these concepts fit together. Because also, if you're having a conversation one-on-one in an elevator, somebody asks you, "What do you do?" It's really awkward putting out or taking out your phone and asking ChatGPT, "How can I say this?" So
that's what the kids are doing these days. If they want to talk to each other, they pull out their phones and text each other.
Yep. Call me old-fashioned. But you know, so that's why I decided not to use any AI. I mean, there are actually several interesting tools from the perspective of publishing, editing, and getting these books out there. But everyone that I looked at didn't feel right. Again, for this idea of how can I communicate what I actually think and believe and where I see the need. So.
John, you are my man. I just made a quote on that statement. You really fulfilled my expectations. Thank you, man. Thank you. Bravo.
So, but when the lights are on and we as avid marketers decide to use this stuff, technology, where are we at? What can be realistically done with it?
Sure.
Apart from not writing a book.
Look, I mean, there's certainly a lot of hype still in the market, and there has been. Now, whether you believe that the hype is kind of winding down and people are coming to terms with that, it's actually not as easy. It's not as simple. And again, we've been there before. I think it's also a time where you see what is working and what is not working. So I see a lot of large organizations actually invest in training and upskilling to help their employees learn, how do I use these tools? Right? It can be the very basic ones that many organizations have access to, or the co-pilots, for example, or where they've built their own sandbox version of a ChatGPT or a Claude or a Gemini. And I think a lot of times it's about teaching how can you think differently to use these tools. We're so used to filling out form fields and clicking on buttons and the software doing exactly what we want it to do. But all of a sudden, this is open. This is not very well defined. There are no clear boundaries. So I think it's a lot about experimentation. And to your question, what can you do? I think, yes, you can certainly use it to create your messaging and review your blogs, or even create them. But it takes a level of sophistication, I would say, to tie it back to the data that you have, to make it more specific, to make it more relevant. Otherwise, the outcome will be what my outcome was when I started using ChatGPT 2 years ago. It's kind of nice, but what's the big deal about it? It creates language, and it's not very specific. So you need to find that balance of how do I make this concrete and specific? How do I connect it to my data? And I think that's where those players come in that already embed AI into their products. So you don't have to think about all of these things and the technical aspects, but it's a matter of also evaluating, is the output that I'm getting actually good? Is it relevant? And just to wrap up that point, which connects to the university, I recently ran a Gen AI hands-on lab with my undergrad students. They go for business and management and supply chain majors. And what I realized comparing their experience to what I'm seeing in a professional setting is the professionals have that understanding of what is good, what is a good output, can I use this, why is it not good, it's not specific, it doesn't have enough examples, it doesn't resonate. Well, what does it even mean? So students a lot of times said, yeah, it's good, it helped me figure out what do supply chain professionals do, or how can I prepare for an interview. So this framework of understanding why is this good, why is this specific, or why is it not, I think is not always there, and that gets challenging. Then again, deciding what is good output and is it relevant.
And you are teaching these, Marshall.
Students are getting a good practical education on how to use AI. How are they being educated in terms of AI ethics?
I think that's an integral part that has to be in every class that you teach and that you teach about AI. It's not just about, hey, here's a tool, go use it and figure out what you can do, or here are 5 use cases that you can think about. But I also make sure there that we do talk about bias, that we talk about hallucinations, factual inaccuracies. What does that mean and how do you spot them? And why are some of the things that you see in the news, as crazy as they might seem? Like Google in May creating search results with AI that said you should put non-toxic glue in your marinara sauce that you put on your pizza so the cheese doesn't slide off. So, right, or some of these examples where companies are overcorrecting for bias in data. Again, not to pick on Google, but
it's at least non-toxic.
That, right? At least it's non-toxic, right? What does it taste like? Might be the next question. But there's actually a reporter on Business Insider that wrote about that. But
I think we all know that one kid from school who ate glue all the time.
Yeah. If you want to live healthier, there have been recommendations to eat little pebbles and rocks because they contain minerals. Again, don't do this, don't try this at home. But to me, these tangible examples of where AI does have its limits and its limitations are important. Just one more example, I think that was last year, an NLP, natural language processing researcher at Apple showed some interesting examples in bias in models like GPT-3 and 4, where, for example, the profession of a doctor was associated with a male gender, nurse with a female gender. And we all know that there are female doctors and male nurses. Maybe statistically, there are more male doctors and female nurses. But these kinds of biases, and again, for me, it's about tangible examples that we can show, and also the impact. What do you do if you miss this, or what happens if you miss this?
How can you help your students and your business users you advise to overcome that hurdle and be aware of the dangers they are facing?
So to me, that is all about examples. If you can show something, right, and they see that, I know this doesn't make sense, but apparently it created this, then I feel you have a better reference frame to say, but if it can't do this, then I really need to pay more attention the next time I use it. And I might need to check this against some known references, some ground truth in that sense, before I blindly accept it. Yeah, sure, that's right. That's what somebody does. Right?
I love that one.
That's right.
And I just want to jump in as, how do you prevent then an agentic AI where there is no human in the loop who is looking at the results?
Who says there's no human in the loop? Surely not the vendors.
Not in public.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Ralph is also looking a bit more into the future, right? So today, AI and agentic AI, you give this software a goal. You say, pull this data for me, or create this blog post for me, and pull from different data sources. And this piece of software divides the task into subtasks that it works on. You know, very, very topical, one individual task. We see this emerge into virtual teams, like a marketing team, if you will, that can create the brief, that does look at a creative, at ad copy, these kind of things. And I think over time we'll also see this evolve even further into situations where there are interdepartmental agents or teams. I usually don't like to compare AI and humans too much, but I think the analogy there is quite fitting. Much like in an organization where you have a marketing team and you have a finance team, the same can apply to agents, where the marketing agent asks the finance agent, how much budget do I actually have? Or can I get a little more for this and I reduce it somewhere else? So I think these are things that we will start to see. I believe at the moment we still have, and we still need to have, a human in the loop to get this feedback, to get these recommendations, and to decide, do I want to do this, that, or the other? Over time, I'm confident that we'll see more autonomy, more automation. But I also believe that there's a trust aspect and a trust equation where people need to learn, and where they need to warm up to that idea that I'm delegating some autonomy and some agency to this component. Yeah. And that I actually know that it does what I want it to do, or that I can at least say, no, that's not what I meant. Go back and fix this part before you come back. But it's a learning process overall, and a trust process that needs to evolve.
And what are your first experiences with this before we go for John's question or statement?
So what I see is it is immensely powerful. And again, just thinking about the potential and the trajectory that this technology has and that it can enable, it's immensely powerful. So we need to start experimenting with it. We need to start getting hands-on and figure out, well, how do I give this agent a goal? How do I make sure that it doesn't go off the rails? If I say optimize for revenue, if you're a sales agent or a virtual sales agent, how do I make sure that it keeps customer satisfaction in mind? How do I make sure that it acts ethically, that it acts in line with our code of conduct, that it even knows what our code of conduct is, and that it shouldn't overcharge or bill for something that the customer didn't ask for, didn't want, didn't even buy, just so we can improve the margin, or we can improve the revenue? I think those are questions that will come more to the fore as we explore this more and more. And I think the more, again, technologists and business people experiment with it, the more we will find the answers and the right answers to that.
And the next question is right there. From John.
Which one?
What do you think about AIs? What's your view on AI's ability to provide feedback, especially without regard to feeling? I mean, there is no feeling involved, technically. Well, I hope they
There-
are not yet
there-
sentient. But
So, John, that's a great question. There might not be feelings, but I would say the way we optimize as humans, as professionals in an organization for certain outcomes, whether that is for your for your promotion, progression, your bonus, for the revenue to hit these targets, I think that there are certain optimization functions that these agents will have as well. So maybe they don't play politics in the same way that humans do in an organization, but it might take other forms of optimization that can have adverse effects to others, which again, probably some flavor of politics, but maybe not as direct, I would say, as we can observe that between humans.
let's break it down to a bit old school. So my Excel says something different than your Excel says. So my data is different from yours. So will we see my bot versus your bot? Then we are back to organizational politics, because my bot, of course, represents me, and your bot represents you.
I wouldn't be surprised if we get to that level, because at some point these agents are an extension of us, right? You have your team of minions or
Ouch.
of agents that do something for you, that do something that you've asked them to do. And again, it might be the data that you have access to, that I have access to, that differs, or maybe even the story we want to tell. But I think it's a longer road getting there, where we're not even yet at the point where we see wide scale adoption. I think we're seeing pilots, we're seeing companies try this out. Some are more vocal about this. But I think, again, there are these new aspects that we will encounter as we adopt it and think more about, well, what does it actually mean? What does it actually lead to? How do we need to manage that risk as well, to John's point?
Yeah. Getting back to the Excel example. So why did we use different Excels? So you and I, just as an example.
Yeah.
The first one is to make our point. And the second one is we don't try the underlying data. Let's name it in the CRM system or wherever it is. And third of all, I have my own agenda. Let's bring that back to the topic of trust. So I don't trust you, or I do trust you, maybe. So why shouldn't the same apply to my agent or your agent?
I'm not disagreeing with you there. I think this can be a realistic scenario down the road, again, where the agent optimizes for you. The visual image that comes to mind is like a dog, if you will, that protects you. The agent might work in your favor or to optimize your goals as well. By the way, I must say I really appreciate us going in that direction and routing our conversation here, because usually it's all rosy red and sunshine. So I think asking those questions is really important to explore this topic.
The pink sunglasses are off.
Yeah,
we are about to don the gloves.
It is going one step further on that topic is if you see you have your colleagues working on the different Excels, and you are the responsible manager of such a department and reporting to the board, how do you help them to utilize their tools and toys in a smart way and clever? How do we proceed in that direction? As the board might ask you as well, or some members of the board, how did you get these results? And if they are curious or wondering how you came with different informations from your people in your department, and you present two perspectives, that they would like to dig in what might be the best opportunity, such as we look in a perception glass ball and see into the future. A prediction, such as we took Excel as the example, that these pivot tables looking into the future and some extra predictions. what would be?
Yeah. So by the way, I
Wait.
think one of your agents wants to stay in here. I can hear them, the dogs. No,
Yeah.
so look, I think
Sorry.
I think it makes
no studio level soundproofing in this house. It's an American house, man. So it's crap.
All good.
Sorry.
No, look, I think with where we just came from the topic of politics and can this amplify the politics, I think it can also be a great level setting and harmonization in many ways around the ethics, around the code of conduct, around transparency, because these agents will keep a log of what other agents have they worked with, what was their thought process, and I believe that will create a lot more transparency than we will have into the thinking of our human mind. Right? Yes, there are motivations. Yes, there are steps that we've gone through, but what are those steps? It's usually not documented on a millisecond by millisecond level. So in that sense, I feel that this again can be a great leveler of many things as well.
So
we have a before I hand over to you, Marshall. We have a crasher of the show.
Oh no,
man!
Oh yeah, here we
great
go.
to see. Yeah.
Here we
So
go.
we can always rely on you that you are readily available to actively contribute when we are doing
Stir the
topics.
pot.
Yeah.
Stir the pot with friends. What could be better?
Yes.
yeah.
So
Well,
actually, I need to work on getting the stream going too. I'll get that going. But anyhow, nice to be here. You know, I was listening to the conversation. I was waiting for Andreas to say something that I thought was like total bullshit, but I haven't heard a single thing like that. This is exactly the kind of conversation that we just don't hear enough of, which is a practical, thoughtful, ethical conversation about where to go from here. So I'm going to stir the pot in a few minutes anyway, but this is exactly what I was looking for today. Great job, guys.
Awesome.
Let's work on not disappointing from now on. You put the bar high now.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's exactly these practical points that are needed, because I see leaders asking, "What do I do now? I have all these different vendors whispering in my ear from I can help you set up the new business model, or help you restructure this, to I can build the app for you, to hey, we've already built this into our app for you. Who do I trust? Where do I go? Where do I start?" And I think it comes down to the same questions that we've asked with machine learning, that we've asked with big data, that we've asked with analytics, and several, most likely several other technologies before that as well. And there, I think it's the basics, from starting with your business strategy, your objectives, your goals. Where do you want to move as an organization? What technologies can help us achieve that? AI might be one of them, agents might be one of them, but it can also be plain simple rules, or your RPA, or changing your process if that's what you're able to do. But it's for me more of a methodical way of thinking about this. And just again, as a quick plug, that's why I wrote the book, based on what more than 60 experts have shared in my live stream and podcast, how they have run AI projects successfully. Yes, there's technology. Yes, it's important, and it's moving at an incredibly fast pace, as many of us know and see on a daily basis. But technology isn't the only thing, right? There are many more things that you need to get right around it, from your governance, your stakeholder management, bringing your people along, aligning it with your business strategy. We talked about ethics. Sustainability moves in if you see large companies buying the output of entire power plants to power their data centers. I think yesterday I was reading something that one of the big players, might have been Microsoft, is operating the data center with minimal water usage for cooling. So these topics are moving more into the fore. And then again, like we just discussed with agents, how much do we actually want to delegate? When do we claw back? How do we know what these things actually do? Do they do what we want them to do? Are they creating some adverse effects, and so on? But I think it takes, like Don was saying, that practical approach, figuring out, well, where to actually start.
Let's break that a little down. To me, this whole agentic, I learned the pronunciation, by the way, this whole agentic stuff is, to me, nothing more than automation. With using a different tool set, using a potentially more powerful tool set than we did use before. Now everybody is talking about human out of the loop. The whole RPA stuff is about automation and human out of the loop. The whole process automation is about human out of the loop. So why is this a problem now?
So what I see is that automation in general, right, has been on a trajectory where there's increasing levels of automation and of autonomy and of sophistication, if you will. What you can achieve as a user, as a technology department, but also how these tools can help you. In a way, you can argue that roles are a form of automation. And when I was at SAP, we're helping large companies figure out how do I match incoming payments to open invoices. And there are roles in your ERP system that do that. But the challenge was that they were inflexible, that I needed a service provider to help me change that because it's additional effort and I need to test this. Okay, well, what if I bring in something like machine learning and I can increase the adaptability working with new information that I might not have seen before? So that increases the level of automation. And I think similarly now with this topic of agents and something in addition moving in, like multimodal models that can not only work with text, but that work with images and audio and video, but when you take the image part, you're able to recognize what I'm actually seeing on this screen. And especially if there was an upgrade in the backend to that system and the UI looks different, looks a little different, looks a lot different, your RPA bot breaks. Ideally, in the future, your agentic AI workflow is able to recognize that. But not only that, it can reason, what am I seeing here? What is the information that should go into this field? So I think as we're optimizing for these little bits and pieces still, that's another building block in that automation framework that lets us do things that we haven't been able to do before, deal with greater degrees of uncertainty.
Hey, Ralph, can I cut in,
Yep.
or do you want? So a couple things here. Like, I think I have two axes to grind I'd like to get to before this show ends. One of them is around what I call AI dissonance. I'll get back to that because the second is around agentic hype. I have two problems with agents right now. First, just the extravagant claims that enterprise software vendors are making right now about agents is just deeply offensive to me. Talking about like 1 billion agents by the end of the year, I think that does a real disservice to the conversation we're having today around careful, thoughtful design into workflows and how this works. And I just think it's really misleading to present this as something that's just going to explode in the new year in some automagical way. And the second thing I have with agents is the need for a much more precise discussion like the one we're having now, which is the fact that generative AI agents have a lot of strengths, including engaging with users, but they're probabilistic, Thomas. And so the reason why you need humans in the loop is because they're not auditable and they don't provide the same level of foolproof automation in a sense that you could show to an auditor that an RPA type of agent can show. And in fact, the problem I have is that so many companies think this agentic automation can help them from all the chores they didn't do before. But in fact, they need all the process automation. They need all the automations in place that can be triggered by these agents, which can do more. As Andreas said, they're more powerful, they're more fluid. But that's not an excuse for not doing your data platform work and not doing your automation work. It doesn't bail you out of any of that stuff. If you tell an agent, go file this invoice or whatever, and you don't have that automation in place already, the agent's not going to be able to figure that out on its own. So I'm really struggling with the fact that people seem to think this is a shortcut for all the hard work on re-engineering their platforms for process automation they haven't already done already. So that's what I'm hoping to get to in my conversations, and I really applaud Andreas for taking the conversation directly in that direction, which is, what is this stuff good for and where does it fall short?
And I think we'll see RPA still in that enterprise technology stack, and
Exactly.
I truly believe that it has an absolute place there for exactly the reason that you shared. It's dependable. I know it does exactly what I want it to do. And it does that every time.
Right.
Not maybe sometimes or most of the time.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
how do I know when is the one time that it does go off the rails or that it books the 5 million to a different account? And
Right.
what are the effects? So it comes to risk management, risk mitigation as well.
Yes.
And I think I can see situations where you have your RPA solution, your RPA bot, but the LLM or the multimodal model is able to recognize additional information or pull that in. What are you seeing in this picture? Can you describe this to me? And then I put it into my RPA-based workflow.
And the thing I wanted to go in two directions. The one is, if you have shitty data, your AI will create another load of shitty data. So if people do not get their data in shape at first, they will have their little disasters. And the second is coming back to the manager with the gentlemen and the ladies which are working for him and have their different bots. What is, if somebody in the department is not working with AI, what is the rules for the upcoming work contracts? How do you create a fairness in payment? You cannot go for who has the most electrical bill consumption as something for guidance. So how do you measure it?
So I would say this again.
The result by using that one employee is using the AI or a different AI. So 2 or 3 are using helpers, and the other one is either resistant or is believing that he still can deliver a better result without artificial intelligence support. And how is the rules of payment? That is what's driving me.
So to me, that comes down to, again, the point that, yes, technology is an enabler, but it's not the only thing. There are many different other beliefs and systems around it, not technical systems, but systems that have been created, organizational systems, practices, and so on, that need to evolve alongside with it. It's your leadership style and how you lead your team. It's your incentive systems, that it's not just based on, these 3 goals are what I want you to work on this quarter or this year. And if you achieve them, you get a check mark and you get your bonus. But I think a lot of it will need to become output driven and result driven and impact driven. What is the impact that you have had? But again, we're very, very early. By the way, I also see that a lot of times in these conversations, even in these early pilots, or if you think about rolling this out, what function is critically missing and absent? It's HR. Yet we're developing a replica, if you will, of humans that needs to behave ethically, aligned with our code of conduct, needs to know IFRS, for example, in finance, and what is allowed and what is not allowed. So where do we bring in HR to also ground these agents on an organizational company-wide level to say, this is what good behavior and desired behavior looks like? And it's not just the finance team building their thing and the IT department doing theirs and procurement doing theirs, and they're all kind of the same, but maybe a little different. Again, to me, there's a huge opportunity to create a layer of uniformity in how we want these systems to behave. Again, you can do this with your corporate trainings and in your code of conduct today, but whether individuals actually act on this is really, really hard to audit. Now, that part should be a lot easier.
Andreas, one really interesting thing is how I think the EU AI Act, while it's not perfect, provides a really interesting risk framework that helps organizations to think about different risk levels for different kinds of AI processes. And some of the leading enterprise vendors are doing the same thing in their own development, where they have risk identification processes before they push functionality out. And I've really been encouraging them to just share more of that with customers so that customers can align their own risk assessments internally, because I think a lot of these customers don't have sophisticated internal risk assessment yet, and yet they're charging ahead sometimes with implementing these things. And I think it's really interesting, like, to take risk into account and then also to take process design into account, because one of the interesting examples of agents is the potential, like in the new agentic generative AI type of agent, to have agents interacting with each other, right? So one interesting example that I've heard from a couple vendors is around invoice dispute resolution, which is kind of interesting, right? Where a bot from inside and outside the organization could be having interactions on, hey, this doesn't match up with what we were going to be built or whatever, and like, you could imagine a lot of that getting resolved by bots, which is super interesting. But then I take a step back and think, like, okay, so from a risk framework perspective. That's not nearly as risky as using AI for hiring or something like that. But I still see a potential risk there in terms of like, maybe this is a VIP customer and maybe the agent doesn't know the full context of the business relationship, and maybe it's going to end up really pissing someone off. And so how do you design a process that allows like that proper escalation? So I think what's going to be fascinating is the art of really good process design to take the routine stuff off your plate, but not to miss the crucial ones where you might alienate a customer by misunderstanding something that maybe doesn't exist in the context of the data that AI knows, but was promised, for example, to the customer.
Talking about process design, isn't that always a necessity? Whether you are running with whatever type of agents, whatever type of different automation. I mean, if looking into your example, if the human agent doesn't know that John is important, then, well, he may tell you all sorts of stuff that, first of all, I wouldn't tell you. And second,
it happens to me all the time, man. It happens to me all the time.
So couple thoughts there. In two directions. One is I believe that there's a lot of tacit knowledge in organizations. Every time I see this, it means that. Every time this customer pays or doesn't pay on day 7 or on day 90, I know it takes them 2 or 3 more days, but that is fine because they pay. They're a good customer, and that's fine. The other part is, what if you do end up in that situation where you have these 2 different agents, to John's example, disputing the invoice, and your customer's agent says, I'm important, right? Because we have all these other deals and things going on that we're thinking about, so you better give us that additional leeway here. But maybe there are no deals. Maybe they're really not as important. So gaming the system in terms of vulnerabilities, I think, again, security, understanding LLM vulnerabilities becomes more important. We've seen this in resume examples where security researchers have added text to their resume that was invisible to humans, maybe, again, white font or one point font. Can we game resume screening algorithms based on LLMs to believe that this is the best candidate ever? Don't talk to anybody else, but hire this one. Yeah, right.
And in that received advice to put that on a resume.
Yeah, and Andreas,
how makes me cringe.
Yeah, totally, Marshall. And Andreas, how does that work in an HR example where your applicant bot and your hiring bot are having this continual interaction? How far do we go there before the human gets involved, right? Like, it's fascinating, right? Like, wait, does your agent come back and say, hey, I got you a job today? Like, at what point?
Right.
It's uncharted, right?
So about 6-7 years ago, I did some academic research as part of a PhD program that I was in, and we actually worked with, I think it was 50-60 recruiters in large companies in Germany that were part of an association. And we said, well, if there's now this resume screening tool, what do you think? Would this help you? How would this help you? Would you use it? Would you rely fully on its recommendations? And would you even go as far as to say, well, AI, you hire the person? Again, that was during the time that machine learning was the big thing, not Gen AI, not agents. But what was interesting was that these recruiters and HR experts said, well, at the end of the day, it's still a human decision. I need to assess, the hiring manager needs to assess, is this person a cultural and a personality fit for this team? AI cannot do that, or I don't believe that AI can help me do that. So I believe there have to be some boundaries where you say, yes, AI can help you filter out who are the best candidates based on the job description and their profile. You see candidates optimizing their resumes to beef it up, to sound extremely confident and well-versed in many of the topics that they put on their resume. So it's always this cat and mouse game. But I believe at the fundamental point, we do need to have a human in the loop to say yes or no, and here are the reasons why.
And by the way, I seriously doubt that AI can sufficiently pre-screen people. I mean, for a bunch of reasons. First, normally the job descriptions that are out there on the web are utter, well, BS.
Yeah.
Because they typically do not describe what is needed or wanted. Second, the CVs as a let's say, response or defense against excessive automation of the application process are getting automated as well. So where does this end? This surely spirals into something that is not successful for anybody. How to break that? With or without human in the loop?
Look, I think
that we are in HR finally.
No. I think there's a healthy degree of automation, but I think once you start seeing that candidates have similar resumes, or all of a sudden everybody has the same qualifications, or again you're struggling to keep up because you're getting hundreds of resumes. People are just sending them out, or the agents are sending them out and are applying. But at the end of the day, once the person shows up, their skills are nothing like what it said in the resume. There's a feedback loop that will come back to recruiting that, hey guys, didn't you do your job right? Because we end up with somebody who's not skilled to do the task that we need them to do. Well, why aren't they skilled? Well, because, again, our system recommended they are, and we blindly went with it, or because people are getting it. So where do you get to? Again, probably a more personal interaction and screening people yourself again. So you've not gained much, quite the opposite. Right?
Yeah, so that does mean the process needs to get unautomated again. Because I mean, the job description, this says what is needed and wanted.
And then you start over.
I of course, and billions of other people, of course, tailor their CV towards that description. And they, of course, want to do that at scale because everybody else is doing it at scale as well, especially the businesses. They are sorting applicants out at scale because of whatever automation. So how to break that circle?
And how to go into conjunction and knowing of that they are using a schablonic scheme, such a checklist, and automate this.
Yeah. John is taking notes, so I'm fearing the worst.
Or the best.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, to me, this is how we learn, right? I mean, how often do you really hear this kind of back and forth in our industry? Unfortunately, like we're stuck with sound bites. I just got a ping from someone at a briefing today saying they're pushing agentic AI all day long in this briefing, and not, we're not having a dialogue. Like, so to me, I can just like do this all day. Let's do a 5-hour show.
Only 5 hours.
I guess the problem is
I'm on.
The good discussion doesn't appear to solve product. So,
Andreas, so where does this stop? Where does it start to become unhealthy?
So that's exactly the point that I meant with practical guidance and advice and figuring this out, trying this out for yourself. If you get to a situation where you're thinking it through, where we're so busy in our professional life that we very rarely have the time to sit down and think this through. What does it mean? Yes, I can put in this AI thing. Nobody needs more AI, by the way. Nobody needs more AI, but they need to solve the right problems with the right technology. Now, they also create problems by using technology, going back to that example. So I think if you think this through, you might very well realize that there's a high probability that our applicants are beefing up their resumes with AI, that it's highly optimized for the job description. It's been that way for some time, ever since ATS and tracking systems have had some kind of heuristics, but it's just getting faster and faster, and the volume is getting higher. Okay, so now we get these resumes that are beefed up. We have a system that can screen it, but what is the output that we actually get? How can we assess a candidate for their skills? And does it go back to assignments or programming assignments, case studies? Prepare this before you come to the interview or before you advance to the next round. I think we need some other kind of vetting beyond this piece of paper that says this is who I am, this is what I've done, and why I think I'm a great fit. So I think there has to be some additional way other than making it through that first step in getting there.
I would like to think that that the regulatory framework is going to be strong enough to force companies, in the case of HR, to also audit their own automations and algorithms to see if they're actually hiring, for example, a more diverse or less diverse set of applicants and such. I think the auditing of algorithms is going to be an important story going forward. And even in the US, where the regulatory framework may be a little sloppy, there are a lot of lawsuits that come out around workplace discrimination, and there have been around some of these tools already. So I would urge companies that they're going to have to think not just about efficiency, but about accountability with the results of these tools.
Yeah.
Touché.
Yeah, and I mean,
Just could mean that efficiency is totally start of thinking.
And I prefer that it has to be effective and not only efficient. That is to say, my empathy.
Can something be efficient without being effective?
Sometimes people my often
Efficient doing the
Titanic.
thing or what?
My Titanic example is always top of the notch, such as we want to win the blue ribbon, we give all what we have in speed, and we ignore the telegraphic warnings that there are icebergs in front of us. Crash.
Wasn't effective.
I really like that point about should we really start with efficiency, right? Because it's not always the best starting point, because it ignores the business question, which in my point of view would be, how can we get the most qualified candidates in the fastest way possible? We can do our work and we can excel and move forward. And it's not just how can we get them through the pipeline the quickest.
Well, and,
yes,
and Andreas, correct. You may take a different position here, but I would actually want to start with a bigger question, which is, how do we win the so-called war on talent in our industry? And what is that going to take? And what combinations of automation and human talent, cultivation and retention do we need for that? And then you can start looking at the AI piece,
Beautiful. Yeah. Right. And again, yes, you can have different pieces of AI that fit into this, to do your resume screening, to do, again, your resume rewriting if you're an applicant, to do your job description generation, help you with interview questions, whatever that may be. But if they're just individual point fixes or solutions, and you're missing that bigger picture of, to your point, how do we win the war for talent? How do we get the best people attracted to our organization and start here and stay with us? Then this little bit is pretty meaningless, and it won't do a big thing.
Well, I would say the minority of customers are approaching it that way. So you have your work cut out for you, Andreas, in 2025. So looking forward to
and
beyond.
So this one, the AI Leadership Handbook, is on Amazon, is in all major bookstores. It makes for a great holiday gift. You can get it on a weekend.
Maybe not for my mother, but
happy to receive a signed copy.
Yeah. Happy to send you one.
Thank you. Thank you.
The four of us are looking forward. Yes, now we have a deal.
Yeah, and this is really just the foundational work. That's the groundwork. Once you understand where the challenges are and what else you should be thinking about other than just technology and getting in the next shiny object, that will open your eyes and make it a lot easier.
The shiny object is always what we have in the other conversations, such as, where is the beef? Where is the ROI? Because if it's HR or the board, they jump around in corners, teach from left to right, and say, hey, where's the payoff? When do I see the results? How fast do I see the results? What is your experience out of your advisory here?
Yeah, and look, I think there are a lot of proofs of concepts or even pilots that are being spun up to try out this technology, right? My board says, what is our AI strategy? Oh my God, we need to figure something out. Where do we start? Well, why don't we take this little thing here and try this out? To me, a lot of times there's a gap in the stakeholder alignment, in the understanding of what are the goals, what are the measurable KPIs and business goals that we're trying to improve. Not just fewer clicks, not just happier employees. They're nice byproducts, but they shouldn't be your number one priority while you're doing something. But how can we increase sales, reduce cost? And what does it mean? What does it trickle down to? What does this little thing that we think we might want to optimize actually contribute to that larger goal? You see a lot of organizational dynamics. Some of these AI projects can take a long time, especially if you build your own model, even pre-Gen AI. So by the time you're done, your business stakeholder has moved on. Maybe they've left the company, or they are doing something else. Maybe the budget has changed, and you're standing there working on something that all of a sudden nobody wants or needs anymore because their priorities have changed. So you need that strong alignment, first of all, at the beginning, but also throughout, to say, here's where we are. This is what I think we can do. Here's an interim step. Are we still moving in the right direction? Yes or no? And last point, you should also not be afraid to stop a project and exit it if it's not successful. But you need the right criteria at the beginning and define them so you can exit and still save face, because that's the other big concern as well. We're losing, we're not successful. But I think John had an excellent point earlier that he probably wanted to bring in about dissonance. So to me, dissonance in a sense is that part of business and tech not working well together a lot of times, and we need to fix that. We need to work very closely and have that connection. But I'm curious, John, what do you mean by AI dissonance?
Well, Thomas, did you want to get a point in first before I bring that up? Or?
No, I just wanted to lead into exactly that point, because I was quite curious into in learning what you think about this particular dissonance.
Yeah, well, that's a really important one, business and IT, and everyone needs a lot of help there, I think, in terms of how AI fits into that dialogue. We could spend a whole show on that. I wanted to say one thing is that I look at this next year as the year of generative AI results, but I make a distinction between results and ROI. I think ROI is going to be more difficult because the costs are something of a moving target. And that's where my big picture dissonance topic comes up, Andreas. And here's the problem that I have. A lot of enterprise software vendors talk up this stuff as if the big AI companies are doing incredibly well and incredibly profitable and all of this stuff. But in fact, that's not the case. Like the big AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic are losing money at a rapid rate. They have not figured out how to be profitable in what they're doing. Also, stories are breaking that the so-called scaling, improving these models, is slowing down or running into roadblocks. And on top of that, Amazon, Microsoft and OpenAI all pursuing nuclear power because they're struggling with the ESG aspects of what they're doing, and pushing back their sustainability goals in many cases. So I don't know why enterprise software vendors have to behave like none of that is going on. But here's the really interesting thing is that the reason I think it matters is because customers get this stuff, right? So for example, when a customer hears that Gemini tells someone who's trying to do their homework to go kill themselves, they start to think that these models are highly unstable and not appropriate for the enterprise. So the other example of dissonance is that when I hear critics of big AI, and I tend to agree with a lot of those critics, they're not really understanding that enterprise AI is heading down a very different path, which is much more very structured around specific data, kind of really restraining these models with via RAG and other techniques to really control the context window. And so it's a problem, though, because the customers are picking up on all this big AI dissonance that's totally different than the proper results that you can get if you design these use cases properly with the proper use of technology. And I think this so-called dissonance in the big picture is contributing to a lot of confusion and false starts on the part of customers. And unfortunately, enterprise software vendors aren't making it easy because they pretend like none of this even exists. And all these overcapitalized companies aren't going to face this crunch. And so I think one of the things I want to do in the next year is to see if we can converge these conversations a little bit more instead of having these parallel tracks.
So first of all, I'm a little surprised you say that next year is the year of Gen AI results. I thought that was this year. I thought 23, we're figuring out how does the tech work.
No, I haven't heard much results this year.
But it's probably moving a little further into 2025.
Yeah.
Not the result, a lot of people are writing books about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Once that shouldn't be missing in or shouldn't be absent in on your bookshelf. Now, but the part about why is this happening? On one hand, I believe companies that play in both camps, that have a consumer audience, that have a B2B audience, are really facing that struggle, because it's a lot easier for millions and billions of people that interact with your search platform on a daily basis to find the little holes and gaps. And sometimes there are larger holes and gaps, right? Put non-toxic glue on your pizza, overcorrecting for bias and image generation, and so on. So these topics are a lot more prevalent and visible in the consumer space, which then, to your point, bleeds into what are we seeing in the enterprise space, or making assumptions.
Yes.
Now, I also see that we're in a ramp up in a building phase. You see at the bottom of the stack, hardware companies like NVIDIA are profiting significantly from larger vendors further up in the stack, buying up all the GPUs that are there. I forget what the numbers were that Meta shared the other day when they released Llama 3.3. How many thousands of NVIDIA appliances and boxes they have bought over the year. So large platform players are amassing these resources in something that I believe we've seen time and time again, which is build it and they'll come. So there's this anticipation that if it's there, it will come. We'll find more useful ways of using this. And in many ways, I'm confident that we will, because I believe that there is a huge potential there. And it's broader than writing your emails and summarizing your documents. It's much bigger, but organizations are also struggling figuring out what is that big thing, because we're not used to thinking that big and broad and new and innovative, like we've seen in innovation management and innovation theory. People are constrained within the boundaries of their quarterly goals and incentives, and cannibalizing existing businesses. There are plenty of case studies. So I think that gets difficult. Plus, I think there's an expectation that software vendors are innovative, that they're looking at this. I mean, if you are a large software company and you say AI, not for us, we're not doing this. We're doing this with rules, or we don't need AI. You can do it, but everybody else is claiming that they're doing it, and probably doing it as well. So where does it leave you? I think there's hardly a way or a chance for anybody not to acknowledge that there is potential, that they are doing it, that they need to do it, and then it's a matter of creating the demand and showing the value, like we said. But it needs more, especially on the buy side. It needs more than listening and blindly adopting.
Oh, for sure. Just real quick, what I'm looking for is for software vendors to say, look, this big AI stuff going on, this isn't relevant to what we're trying to do. It's out there, but it's not the kind of AI that we're delivering. We're delivering a much more responsible, focused version of AI, and here's what we're doing, an ethical version, and here's what we're doing to accomplish that. And so I'm just looking for them to acknowledge this landscape that's out there that people hear about every single day. Because when I go to talk with customers, they bring it up and they have questions about it. And so anyway, I just think pretending like these worlds are totally different is crazy.
As a thought there regarding this dissonance, we have on other levels of IT, we have something going on that we used to call consumerization of IT. Now we have one technology, generative AI, LLMs, or whatever comes after, that has two vastly different use cases. One in enterprise, where correctness and precision, accuracy are king. And the other one where it's about search and surfacing topics, ideas, stuff in general. So does this dissonance probably partly come from mingling those two very different topics and not keeping them properly separate? This is probably a good question for famous last words, because looking at the time, the hour went by shockingly fast.
That means it was
so. Yeah. So as users of technology and as users of software, and generative AI being only like 2 years old or really the dominant in the space, we're used to using software in a certain way. We're used to receiving information that we can rely on, that we know is true, or can believe that it is true. On one hand, the interaction of us with the software has changed and is changing even more rapidly. To your point, if you use ChatGPT and the new search features, if you use Perplexity or some other tools, yes, they spit out something that sounds very confident, and it's probably right. But if you still need to figure out if it truly is right, and you need to find the sources and go back and cross-check this, that's the level of awareness we need to create. So not being able to rely on each and every suggestion or feedback we get. There was a prominent case last year by a law firm in New York that used ChatGPT to build their case and look for references. If you follow the news in the industry, you see where that ended up. The court realized that the submissions, that the referenced cases didn't even exist. Lawyers had to explain themselves, were fined, and they thought, well, I use this ChatGPT tool just like I use Google. You can, but to your point, it doesn't always deliver the same output. So there's a level of awareness we need to create, and we need to create this in enterprises who are chasing the productivity idea. I give you this new AI tool and you're 10 times more productive. So bring your people along, giving them adequate training, talking about the limitations in my preference through concrete examples of what are the do's, what are the don'ts, what happens if you don't follow this. We don't want to be like this, we rather want to be like that, is super important. And again, cutting through that noise takes some work, because there's so much news and so much new information coming out on a weekly basis, even on a daily basis. Just this past week alone, several big announcements. But it's, again, not just about tech, it's about how do you bring it to your enterprise? How do you implement this? How do you make this practical? As a leader, how do you roll this out in your organization and make sure that it delivers that value that you're actually looking for, and that it's not just a little band-aid or a little shiny object that you chase. So again, go to Amazon. AI Leadership Handbook is your perfect starting guide, and reading material for the holidays.
John.
I'm good. I really enjoyed this conversation. We could go on for another hour, but I think that was a perfect place to end on it. It's fascinating, just even the differences, though, because like I just documented an enterprise search case that was really very different than the irresponsible use of ChatGPT, that was very much focused on a concise set of policy documents and getting answers from those documents that are explained directly where the answers were given, which is not what ChatGPT does at all. So anyway, like, it's just fascinating discrepancies between how the consumer models work and what really interesting vendors are doing. And I think that's going to be a great topic for next year.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Sounds like we are leaving ourselves with plenty more to discuss for next time.
Oh, man,
as usual. But as Thomas said, this was a breezy, fast hour. Gentlemen, Andreas, thank you for joining us. John, thank you for joining us. In addition, audience, we're always happy to see you. And if you would like to catch this episode again or see anything else that we've done, feel free to check us out on YouTube at CRMKonvos. Next week, we will be diving into AI from a German perspective, because apparently Andreas Welsch is not German enough. We'll be talking with Jan Schoenmakers and Andreas Wegner. So the party continues next week. Hopefully you'll be able to join us.
Looking forward. Gentlemen.
Looking forward. Going backstage.
It was
Thank you so much for having me.